So another week and another college football recap segment. This will be the last one of the season as we prepare for bowl season and the college football playoffs. So starting off with just a few of the bigger conference championship games, starting off with the SEC title game between Georgia and LSU. I think everybody kind of expected Georgia to come into this game, play pretty well against LSU, show that they're still dominant, the dominant team in college football and the SEC. And they did just that, winning 52-30. Jaden Daniels for LSU, he did end up getting hurt in this game. So Garrett had to come in, his backup. He threw for almost 300 yards, but a lot of that was just near the end of the game. It was really over, around halftime. Georgia was up already 35-10 at the half. So very impressive game by Georgia. Stetson Bennett, he looked good, almost 300 yards passing himself, 4 touchdowns. Kendall Milton, he had 113 yards on the ground. So overall, I mean, a really good game for Georgia offensively. But I would say defensively, I don't think they're too happy, even though, again, they were up 35-10 at half, allowing 30 points like they did, and allowing 500 passing yards. Probably not what they wanted to happen in this one. So dominating win, yes, but definitely some things they can work on going forward, preparing for the playoff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's not much more you could ask for from Georgia out of this game other than a better defensive performance, right? You allow 30 points, still to blow them out while allowing 30. That's always a great feeling. But 30 points, 500 passing yards is definitely not something you want to allow to happen. Two guys come in and split 500 pretty evenly between you as well. That's not really great. To let the backup come in and throw for 294 yards on just 15 completions. Incredible performances by the two LSU quarterbacks. Their offense did great here, but Georgia comes in, plays probably how we thought they would play. I didn't know if this game would be close. LSU had some weird games this season against their better opponents, but this one ends up being a Georgia domination. And I think they're just going to want to look at their defense going forward and not allow that many yards again. Going from there, we move over into the Big 12 as Kansas State took on TCU. TCU was ranked third, still are, but they did fall to Kansas State 31-28. Pretty good game for both teams. TCU kind of had to storm back, forced overtime. Max Duggan played well. He played his heart out, 18 for 36, 250 yards, and a touchdown. He also rushed for 110 yards and a touchdown, really doing the best he could. But they fall short in overtime. They're not able to punch it in. And Will Howard for the Kansas State Wildcats does really well. It's 199 yards, 2 touchdowns. Deuce Vaughn, though, 130 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So pretty good game back and forth between these two. Not a loss TCU should be super ashamed of, right? They come in as a pretty strong rival. They take the championship crown here. TCU falls by 3 points, and they hold on to their playoff spot anyway. Just an impressive football game from both these two teams. They both put their heart out, and TCU definitely has things to look at, right? You don't want to allow that kind of offensive performance against you again. Anyway, you lost the game. There's plenty of things to look at. You could clean up some of the turnovers as well. Matt Duggan did throw a pick at one point. But overall, I think the Horned Frogs did fine here. Props to the Wildcats, though, for taking on the Big 12 championship and being able to hold that title for this year. And, I'm sure they'll be wanting to get after it. They finished pretty high in the rankings, too, and they should have a good season next year.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The loss didn't really make too much of a difference. I did expect TCU to win, but losing overtime to Kansas State, it's not like Kansas State were bombs or anything. So not a big deal. Max Duggan definitely played his heart out near the end there. I mean, that last drive where they scored, I mean, he was literally putting the team on his back there. I mean, he could barely get off the field. So definitely impressive by him, but TCU just could not stop Deuce Vaughn. I mean, 130 yards, had just one touchdown, but I mean, his impact, I mean, every single time he got the ball, it seemed like he was going to break it for, 20. So, they got some things to look at because obviously you lose in overtime. You have some plays where you can't get it in overtime on that 4th down near the goal line. And then Kansas State, of course, in turn, you're at the 25 already. So it's not like they have to go that far to get a field goal and win. But again, not a huge deal for TCU. I think they just had to look good in this game, not get blown out, of course. Still only have one loss. They move on to the playoffs. A team that isn't moving on, however, are the USC Trojans, where they lose once again to Utah. This time it's a lot more than 3 points. They lose 47-24 in the Pac-12 championship game. I do know, obviously, Caleb Williams, he was hurt in this game, but he kept going. So you really can't say too much about that. I mean, even if he, did get hurt, he kept playing. So that's what it is. He did have 400 yards, did have an interception, but Utah, they just ran over him. 105 yards for one back, and then Micah Bernard, he had 88 yards. So really good running game. And then Cameron Rising, he had 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and no interception for himself. So, yeah, I know Utah. Obviously, they beat them early in the season, but it was just by 3. And with the way USC had been playing, I didn't expect for them to lose this one. I thought they would win. They would be in with that one loss and a conference championship to their name. However, they lose, they get blown out, and obviously it cost them.
Yeah, this one is one. It kind of shows why we on the show here we'll give you the box score and then we'll get deeper into things and kind of talk about what was really happening in the game. If you were to look at this and look at Caleb Williams and see 28-41, 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, only a pick, you would think, oh, so they won, right? Or if they lost, it wasn't a big loss, right? No, they lose 47-24. They put up 24 points. That's great. They put up a lot of yardage, but Utah just was crazy on the ground and in the air. They would have both the whole package together and take this win pretty confidently, and not only knock out their big rival from getting into the playoffs, they also finished ahead of them in their rankings. You can argue about that if you wish to. Utah finished 10-3, USC was 11-2, but both those losses were to Utah. So I think it is fair to say that a 10-3 Utah team that beat USC twice has no business being under Utah. They finished 7th and 8th. But yeah, Utah might be a team to look out for next year. We thought USC would be the one this year to kind of crawl up and get into the playoffs and have an interesting lineup. And get to see USC and TCU in the playoffs alongside Michigan and Georgia. But no, Utah came in and said, we got you last time, barely. Gary, we're just going to handle business today. And USC fans have really no business demanding that they get in after that. You can't lose your championship 47-24 and expect to make it into the playoffs when you're already kind of an on-the-cusp type of team. So we've alluded to the rankings here as we talk about our championship contenders here. Just to kind of give a final rankings, the top 4 right now are, of course, Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. Ohio State able to climb back in after USC's unfortunate fall. Alabama just on the cusp. Tennessee just on the cusp. So yeah, pretty good game, or pretty good top 4. I think Ohio State out of the other teams is probably the best deserving team of being the 4th spot. The top 2, of course, Michigan and Georgia, or Georgia and Michigan, are 13-0. TCU is 12-1, with their one loss being pretty narrow. Ohio State 11-1. Can't fault that either. So I fully think the top 4 is what it should be. And yeah, I don't think you can make a strong case for Alabama over Ohio State. Although I know Alabama fans are definitely up in a fire because they're not there. And the fun fact, this is like the first time in the CFP era that the playoffs don't have either Clemson or Alabama. So get to see a little bit different stuff happening. We did just see Georgia win, and they are number 1 again. But yeah, this is I like what we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about this this last week with the Ohio State Michigan game, we assumed Ohio State's cooked because they got destroyed by Michigan in that 3rd and 4th quarter. At the end of the game, they lose on their home turf. They're obviously not going to be able to go to the Big Ten title game. So at that point, I think a lot of people assume like, okay, Ohio State's done, and whatever happens in the conference championship games with Georgia and Michigan, especially, but then TCU and then USC, we figured, okay, it didn't really matter too much. But since USC not only lost, but got beat up by the same team they lost to early this season, you had to get them out of there. So, yeah, I definitely understand. And Ohio State, I know a lot of people were saying like you shouldn't get rewarded for sitting at home while another team loses their conference championship. I understand, but I will say this, and again, this is as someone saying, I just said last week that Ohio State was cooked. Ohio State, the only way they could have gotten to the championship game is obviously by beating Michigan. So it's not like they, lost 3 or 4 games and somehow made it to the playoffs that way. They lost just 1 game. They're the only other 1-loss team besides TCU. And the Big Ten still has divisions as of right now. So, if Ohio State was in the other division, not in the division with Michigan, it wouldn't matter. Whereas the Pac-12, they don't. Big 12 doesn't have divisions either. So it just really comes down to what kind of conference you're in and how they do things as far as who gets to play who in the championship game. Is if the Big Ten didn't have divisions, Ohio State would have been in there against Michigan in a rematch despite losing to them the week before. So I don't think that argument really makes too much sense in that context. So yeah, it definitely they got it right there. I was a little scared that they were honestly going to drop ECU and put Bama in there. I mean, the commentators on multiple networks were pushing that a whole lot in that afternoon evening slot, and I just don't understand it. Like other than being Alabama, they had no business being up there. You lose twice before your conference championship week. You don't make the conference championship. You shouldn't be in unless Ohio State. If Ohio State had another loss already, then I guess you can kind of make the argument. But Ohio State just had one. They got it right. All right. So Alabama definitely should be on the outside looking in. So now we move to the Heisman finalists that was released this weekend as well. And not super surprising, except for maybe one person on this one. We had Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC, of course, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Max Duggan from TCU. I think the biggest surprise here, though, is Stetson Bennett from Georgia. Not to discount what Stetson has done this season. Obviously, he just won a championship last year. But I think a lot of people probably do agree that there might have, been better candidates. I mean, Blake Corum from Michigan, Hendon Hooker. I know he didn't finish the season, but he played better than him for most of the season. Obviously losing to him in that head-to-head matchup. But I don't think it really makes that big of a difference in the end, though, because it'll probably still just end up being either Caleb Williams or Max Duggan taking it home.
Yeah, I think I agree on that one. Stetson Bennett is definitely my fourth overall pick for Heisman here. Out of the list we're given, I'd put him lower than 4. Once again, not to discredit him, not to discredit Georgia. They're a great team. He does great things. But yeah, I don't think that he's exactly like the top reason that they're up there. He just doesn't have the statistics that match some of the other guys. So I really think it should be Caleb Williams or Max Duggan. I'd be really happy to see Max Duggan get it out of TCU after the season he had. Caleb Williams, despite those 2 bad losses to Utah, would also be really good to get it. He's fought through a lot of injury this season and done really, really well. So yeah, I mean, definitely not the most the prettiest decision for him, but I think that makes it better. CJ Stroud, great as well, but Max Duggan and Caleb Williams are my top 2 picks on this year's Heisman ranking. So from there, we go into a little more college football. Just big week, as you know, as it comes to a close, and we get to some of our bowl games. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you you can start us off here with some of the bowl games that you're most excited for.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously going to be the end of the year, New Year's Six bowl games. Of course, you have the college football playoffs. We'll get to that in a second. But besides that, you got some interesting matchups here. You got the Sugar Bowl. You've got Alabama and Kansas State. So Big 12 champion Kansas State going up against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. You got the Citrus Bowl with LSU facing Purdue. Purdue was just in the Big 10 title game, LSU in the SEC title game. Cotton Bowl with USC and Tulane. So that'll be an interesting matchup, seeing Tulane go up against, one of these Power 5 schools like that. And then the Rose Bowl. Utah will be facing off up against Penn State, 8 versus 11 in that one. And then after that, of course, you have the national championship game on January 9th. So yeah, those pretty much going to be the bowl games I think everybody's really paying attention to. You also have the Orange Bowl with Clemson and Tennessee, as well as the Notre Dame South Carolina matchup as well. So I think we got a lot of pretty good bowl games, just aside from the national championship and, of course, the semifinals.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really, really fun bowl season. You've also got the Alamo Bowl with Washington versus Texas, which could be fun for some people, depending on how those teams play. I, of course, will be definitely tuning into the Orange Bowl, the very orange Bowl, as Tennessee and Clemson take each other on. I think that'll be a fun matchup. Unfortunately, and Hooker not being there, but that should be a good one. I'm sure a lot of people, we live in South Carolina, a lot of people are going to be looking at the Gator Bowl as well to see USC face off against Notre Dame after the seasons those two have had. Um, yeah, I think we got some fun bowl games here, and I think there's a lot of fun to go around. I really do think the Sugar Bowl with Kansas State and Alabama should be a really fun one too. See how Kansas State is able to perform against Alabama, and see what people see how that comes out of there. And yeah, I think the LSU Purdue game is going to be fun, and USC Tulane should be interesting. It's cool to see Tulane face off against a team like USC, and I hope that the Utah Penn State game is also at least a shootout. I think all these bowl games have potential to go back and forth. And really, with a bowl game, that's what I want to see. I don't want to see anybody get crushed. I'd like to see a lot of back and forths. That would be my preferred options for these games, is to see some fun football back and forth. Nobody's ever counted out until the end. That's what makes college football so fun.
So, last but not least, just quickly here, we're still, essentially almost a month out away from the playoffs, but early predictions here, obviously Michigan will face off against TCU. Georgia plays against Ohio State. Not to just pick the favorites here, but I think most people probably pick Georgia against Ohio State and then Michigan to beat TCU. From there, we get a rematch of the semifinals of last year with Georgia facing off against Michigan. And I do think Michigan will fall to Georgia once again, but it definitely will be a whole lot closer than it was last year, for sure.
Yeah, I think as far as these teams match up, we actually get the best potential for an upset in both of the first rounds. I don't really think either are going to happen, but I think TCU poses a strategic threat to Michigan. I think Ohio State is a pretty strong threat against Georgia. I do think the two favorites will be able to get through there, and then yeah, I think Georgia is probably going to overpower Michigan. It would be cool to see Georgia not get it twice in a row. I'm sure Georgia fans are not going to want to hear that, but I think the favorites are probably going to go all the way through, and we'll probably see Georgia repeat. They just have an incredible team. But I do think that these opening matchups are going to be the biggest chance for an upset. In that case, I don't know. TCU might be stronger than Ohio State. That presents a fun matchup there. But we'll just have to see. I won't give a prediction for every possible outcome. Um, but but yeah, I think I'm going to follow you on the same thing and say that Georgia will probably end up beating Michigan for the championship. So I do think Michigan and Georgia will have a fight on their hands in that first round.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We will be covering some of these bowl games and, of course, the college football playoffs and the national championship. Definitely excited for bowl season coming up.